On the ground now at the crash site is 11 a.m. reporter Jim Maher, who's been talking to the police and politicians heading up the crash inquiry. Jim, we know the steam train had stopped at the time of the crash. Do we know yet why there was apparently no warning to the driver of the intercity train?
Darren, what went wrong will depend very much on what the passengers have to say, I would say. The indication so far from a lot of those passengers in the train behind the steam train is that they stopped for a while. They were led to believe that the steam train had stopped ahead of them, that there was a problem, then that the way was clear or the steam train had moved off, and the electric train then began to move. After a short time, it slammed into the back of the steam train. So when that inquiry gets underway, that will be the focus of the investigation. At the moment, of course, there is very little to say on that score.
Jim, most of the effort has gone on throughout the night. What did daylight reveal?
Daylight reveals on one side of the track here a pile of matchwood. That was the rear carriage of the steam train. It's just shattered wood. Behind me there's the cleanup continuing. They're trying to remove the electric train from the track. They're laying down a track of ballast here so that cranes can get in there and just haul it physically off the track and out of the way so that those 20,000 commuters who use the track daily can get back to using the train.
Jim, thank you. We'll get back to you later in the program. Jim Maher joining us from Brooklyn, the scene of the
Any indication yet when the line will be cleared?
Yes, good morning, Anne. Hopefully it would be cleared by the end of the day. That's what the officials are hoping. The task here, of course, is to get those commuters back on the tracks. It's a very heavy use of this line. The task of the investigators is to find out exactly what happened. And I have with me for you Greg Crowther from CityRail.
Good morning, Mr. Crowther.
Good morning, Anne.
The question, of course, is why? Why could such a tragedy happen? Can you shed any light on what might have happened for us this morning?
Not an answer at this stage, Anne. We have our rail safety audit group who have been on site, in fact, I think about half an hour after the accident, right through to the early hours of this morning. They've been examining both trains, speaking with our staff on the trains and also with passengers. Paralleling that inquiry, as you would be aware, there's a coronal inquiry, so that's where we're up to in terms of investigating what actually caused this disaster.
All right, you live with trains. In your mind, you must have found it extraordinary that a moving train could crash into the back of a stationary train.
Probably extraordinary isn't the word for it, and you know, we're all shocked at CityRail. We take a great pride in the rail system that we run, and to have a disaster like this really strikes at the core of those that call the railway their business.
A couple of interesting points were raised by some of callers into Channel 7 this morning. One man said there should have been explosives placed on the track behind the stationary train to warn any approaching train, but it seems nobody heard any explosives.
Right, well, those sort of details I don't have, and probably what they were referring to is we're about to get run over by a tractor here, a safety working regulation whereby if a train is disabled, you in fact lay detonators along the track. Now, I really don't have the details of whether they had the time to do that or what were the circumstances. I say that is subject to the full safety report.
All right, and of course the other question that it raises is, should an old steam train be on the same track as a modern locomotive?
Well, that's a question probably that will be answered probably in another forum. Just as we have great pride in running a very modern system with our Tangaras and soon to be released City Decker trains, we certainly have a special place for our older comrades in terms of the 3801 and such steam trains, Anne.
Yes, okay. Well, the sad part, of course, is the shocking loss of life and the number of injuries. Is there any update on the number of casualties at this stage?
No, and just the information that we have here is that there have been 6 fatalities and about 70 people in different hospitals around Sydney. Just speaking in terms of those that have suffered from this accident, I'd like to sort of pay special tribute to the people up at Barara RSL who in the course of late last night and early this morning processed some 600 people who survived the accident. They took their names, addresses, and then we arranged to have those folk then transported either to home or a destination that suited them. So there are a lot of people, including the Salvation Army as per usual, who do a sterling job in such a disaster.
Yes, I'm sure they have. Mr. Crowther, thank you very much for your time this morning. Mr. Greg Crowther from the SRA, and also Jim Marr joining us there from that crew of Sydney now to give us an update on the situation. Jim, good morning once again.
Good morning, Anne. Yes, they're very close to the stage where they're pulling the electric train off the track. That will happen in the next few minutes, of course, and that will restore services very soon to this section of line between Sydney and Newcastle. Restoring confidence, of course, is another matter, and that process will begin this afternoon when the Transport Minister, Mr. Baird, and rail officials meet the press and answer some of the questions about what may have gone wrong. There's now some suggestion that someone may have pulled an emergency brake on the steam train, but we'll find out more about that this afternoon. Back to you, Anne.
OK, Jim Marr, thank you very much for that. Jim joining us